me take you back to a time when the world stood still, not because it wanted to, but because it had no choice. A time when kings fell, empires shattered, and humanity saw the full weight of its own ambition. This is the story of World War I. And trust me, this isn't just about dates and battles. It's about a chain reaction, a moment of chaos that changed everything. So settle in, because this story, this very real story, is one everyone should hear. June 28, 1914, Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was visiting the city with his wife Sophie. The couple had just narrowly avoided an earlier attempt on their lives that morning. But later that day, as their motorcade rolled through the streets, a young man named Gavrilo Princip stepped forward with a pistol and pulled the trigger. That single act shook the world. Austria-Hungary pointed the finger at Serbia, claiming they were behind the plot. Backed by its powerful ally Germany, Austria issued Serbia a list of demands. Serbia agreed to most, but not all. That slight hesitation was enough. Exactly 1 month later, on July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. And like dominoes, other nations followed, bound by secret promises, old rivalries, and fear. But here's the truth. It wasn't just about an assassination. Europe in 1914 was a boiling pot of tension. Germany, a rising industrial power, felt cornered by Britain and France, older colonial empires with vast territories. Germany wanted a seat at the imperial table and feared being shut out. It began building up its navy, sparking an arms race with Britain. France, meanwhile, longed to reclaim Alsace-Lorraine, which Germany had taken decades earlier. Russia saw itself as the guardian of Slavic nations like Serbia. But more than that, it had ambitions in the Balkans and didn't want Austria-Hungary muscling in. And Britain? Though hesitant at first, they saw Germany's growing power as a threat, especially to their control of the seas. Even Italy switched sides mid-war, lured by promises of land and influence. It was pride, fear, revenge, and ambition, all wrapped in a tangled web of treaties. The war didn't begin in a vacuum. It was already waiting in the wings. Here's where things spiral. Germany supported Austria, Russia backed Serbia, France supported Russia. Britain joined in when Germany invaded neutral Belgium, trying to get to France. And in just days, a regional dispute had turned into a global conflict. Soon the world was split. The Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and later Bulgaria, versus the Allied Powers, France, Russia, Britain, Serbia, Belgium, and eventually Italy, the US, and others. By the end of 1914, the war had ground to a halt in the West. The battlefield stretched from the North Sea all the way to the Swiss border. Soldiers dug into the earth, carving out endless trenches. Day after day, month after month, men faced each other across no man's land, with little more than barbed wire, mud, and uncertainty between them. New technologies made things even worse. Machine guns, tanks, and, for the first time, poison gas changed warfare completely. In 1916, 2 major battles scarred the year. Verdun, a fortress in France that Germany tried to overwhelm, and the Somme, where the British launched an offensive that became one of the most intense fights of the war. On the very first day, tens of thousands were injured or taken from the lines, many before even reaching enemy trenches. Meanwhile, far from Europe, the war's reach stretched. The Ottoman Empire battled in the Middle East. Japan seized German outposts in Asia. Troops from India, Africa, Australia, and Canada joined in. Then, in 1917, 2 events changed the game. First, Russia broke from within. Exhausted, starving, and tired of endless losses, revolution broke out. The Tsar stepped down. By the end of the year, the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, took control and signed a peace treaty with Germany. Second, the United States entered the war. So how did America, all the way across the ocean, get pulled into this? Well, imagine this, it's 1917. Germany's struggling and decides to restart unrestricted submarine warfare, meaning they'll attack any ship, including American ones, that might be helping the Allies. But here's the twist. Germany also secretly sends a message known as the Zimmermann telegram to Mexico. In it, Germany basically says, "Hey Mexico, if you join us and attack the US, we'll help you get back Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico." Crazy, right? But British intelligence intercepted it, and when they showed it to the Americans, the reaction was explosive. Even folks in the US who wanted to stay neutral said, "Okay, now it's personal." That telegram helped swing public opinion, and by April 1917, the US had entered the war. With Russia out, Germany launched a huge offensive in early 1918, trying to win before US troops arrived in full force. For a while, it seemed like it might work. They pushed deep into French territory. But then, momentum shifted. Fresh American forces arrived. Allied armies began pushing back. Germany's allies, like Austria and the Ottomans, started falling away. By the autumn of 1918, even German generals admitted they couldn't go on. On November 11, 1918, at exactly 11 a.m., an armistice was signed. The fighting stopped. The war was over. In June 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. Germany had to accept full responsibility for the war. They lost colonies, paid billions in reparations, and saw their military stripped down. It was a peace deal, yes, but also a recipe for resentment. Empires were gone. Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, and the German monarchy all collapsed. New countries were born: Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Poland, the Baltic states, and more. The League of Nations was created to try to prevent this kind of conflict again, but without the US joining, it lacked teeth. There are parts of this story we don't talk about enough. Millions of colonial soldiers from Africa, India, and beyond fought with bravery. Many returned to their homelands hoping for respect, but faced silence. The emotional toll on survivors was devastating. The soldiers after the war, they carried more than just physical wounds. They brought back something the world didn't yet understand. They called it shell shock. Men who had stood through endless shelling would flinch at a car backfiring. Some couldn't sleep, others couldn't speak. Some would collapse without warning. It wasn't weakness, it was trauma, what we now know as PTSD. It forced doctors to see that not all wounds are visible, and the Spanish flu, which broke out just as the war ended, would claim more lives than the war itself. Between 1918 and 1920, the Spanish flu infected about 500 million people, a third of the world's population, and it claimed an estimated 50 million lives. Imagine surviving the trenches only to face this invisible enemy. So who won World War I? Technically the Allies, but the truth? There were no real winners, only countries that lost more slowly. And in the ashes of that first global conflict, a new world order emerged of fragile peace that would only last 20 years. But that is a story for another day. If you made it this far, thank you. History isn't just about names and numbers, it's about people, decisions, moments, and World War I was full of them. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell if you want more stories just like